Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet. I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism.
With razor-sharp wit, Bill Maher unloads on Bernie Sanders and AOC, exposing how their flashy tactics hilariously backfire in public view.
James Carville knew how to win, and he blamed the Democratic losses this November 2nd on stupid wokeness, to which AOC fired back that wokeness is a term almost exclusively used by older people these days. So that should tell you all you need to know. What? This is a term folks like you brought out very recently and had been proudly displaying at every march since. Just last year, The Guardian declared woke the word of our era. I guess they didn't get the memo from the Mean Girls Club. We don't use that emoji anymore. Woke, please. We say fetch now.
Sanders still clings to his White House ambitions, while AOC stays coy about her future and may even welcome a run. Yet strangely, their momentum keeps stalling. That's where Maher cracks it open, revealing exactly why their playbook keeps falling apart. As always, smash the subscribe button, and let's get started right now.
Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week.
Bill Maher argues that Bernie Sanders' approach breaks down because his ideas rarely translate into broad voter support. Even when Bernie rejects the label, Maher says his agenda is consistently viewed as socialism. From steep taxes on the ultra-wealthy to his long-running push for single-payer healthcare, Maher contends these proposals, while cheered in progressive circles, often clash with mainstream opinion and limit their electoral appeal. He points to real examples from Sanders' own Vermont, where efforts to implement single-payer healthcare hit major roadblocks and ultimately failed to deliver the sweeping results that were promised. Maher treats this case as a cautionary tale, arguing that Sanders' broader strategy of promoting large-scale socialist reforms may sound inspiring on paper, but repeatedly falters in practice, especially when voters grow wary of expanded government power. The conclusion is stark. Rhetoric alone doesn't win lasting political victories. Elections reward pragmatism, clarity, trust, results, and timing.
I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism.
Maher adds that another major reason Bernie Sanders and AOC seem to be losing steam is the Democratic Socialist label itself. He argues this branding distances them from mainstream Democrats in the eyes of many voters. While Democrats are generally seen as supporting progressive reform within a capitalist framework, Maher says Democratic Socialists are perceived as advocating much deeper government control over the economy. That distinction matters, because for many Americans the word socialism still raises fears of government overreach and economic instability, even when Sanders and AOC moderate their policies in practice. Maher contends the label alone can spark doubt among moderates and swing voters. In his view, the Democratic Socialist identity fires up a loyal progressive base, but ultimately limits their reach and weakens their prospects in national elections.
The DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more. You think you're going to win an election on that? This just seems like more extremism at a time when Americans are begging both parties, please, could just one of you act normal?
Maher says fear sits at the heart of why many Americans remain wary of Democratic Socialists. Fear that if they ever gain power, today's problems could quickly become much worse. Voters are already frustrated by ongoing issues like immigration, economic strain, and rising government spending. Maher notes that when people look at current arguments over border enforcement under Biden, some worry that Democratic socialist leadership would bring even heavier government involvement. The message is blunt. Voters may grumble about Biden's approach, but when they stack it against what Democratic socialists might push, he can suddenly seem far more palatable. Maher uses this contrast to explain why figures like Bernie Sanders and AOC struggle to expand beyond their progressive base. It's not pure hostility to their ideas, he suggests, but a persistent fear that sweeping reforms could unleash consequences felt across the entire country.
It's either defund the police or military in the streets. Either MAGA's crypto crony capitalism or city-run grocery stores. No, I don't want that. I want a Democrat who reassures me if you like your Whole Foods, you can keep your Whole Foods.
Maher leaves no doubt about where he stands. He supports capitalism, a system he believes empowers individuals to guide their own lives, make independent choices, and reap the rewards or face the consequences that follow. He argues this framework drives innovation, rewards hard work, and strengthens personal responsibility, giving people the freedom to build their futures without heavy-handed government control. That belief resonates with many Americans and sits at the heart of the American dream itself, a vision where success is within reach for anyone regardless of where they begin through drive, creativity, and persistence. From Maher's perspective, socialism threatens that ideal by concentrating power, limiting opportunity, and dulling ambition. By defending capitalism, he is ultimately defending freedom, accountability, and the right of every individual to shape their own path.
Senator Lex Vanberger once said about Biden's presidency that, quote, nobody elected him to be FDR. They elected him to be normal. Normal. You know, at this year's DSA convention, or as it's commonly known, Comic-Con, get this, you had to submit a photo of a negative COVID test to get in. In 2025. Yeah, no one wants to do that again. We've had enough of Trump's macho and also enough of politics.
Here Maher targets Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for what he sees as weak leadership and an over-reliance on activist pressure. His critique centers on moments when both choose to ride activist energy instead of rising above it. He points to their appearances at massive Fight the Oligarchy rallies, where tens of thousands of progressive activists gather to attack corporate power and push a left-wing agenda, with Sanders and AOC often repeating crowd chants and grievances, rather than shaping a message that reaches beyond their base. In another example, far-left groups at a rally accused them of not going far enough on the Israel-Palestine issue, leaving both politicians responding to activist demands instead of clearly defining their own positions. Maher argues that by blending in with the loudest voices rather than asserting authority, they erode their appeal to moderates and make it much harder to connect with the broader electorate.
These Democratic socialists at another of their conventions, they were told to make jazz hands instead of clapping, lest some delegate suffer sensory overload. And also, and I'm not joking, they were told not to be wearing, any aggressive scents.
Please don't go into that space with anything that's like an aggressive scent, for instance, right? Because that's going to be difficult for people.
Oh, for sake.
Maher says this is exactly the kind of activist rhetoric he expected Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to challenge. Instead, they seem to go along with it. He highlights the sheer absurdity of certain activist norms, including the infamous moment at a conference where attendees were instructed to clap in a very specific way to supposedly prevent sensory overload. Maher's question cuts sharp. How does clapping of all things become overwhelming? Why is it treated as something beyond criticism? And more importantly, was everyone truly on board with these jazz hands rules, or were some people quietly cringing in silence in Maher's view? Leaders like Bernie and AOC should be setting limits and guiding their supporters, not absorbing every new ritual that emerges from activist spaces. When they fail to do that, he argues, they risk alienating moderate voters who see this messaging as confusing, performative, and far too extreme.
This is who the Democrats are thinking of following. Chuck Schumer ain't perfect, but at least he doesn't crumple into a heap when confronted with Chanel No. 5. You may now clap in the traditional way. Thank you very much.
This clip stands out because in a rare moment, Maher, who has often gone after Chuck Schumer, actually gives him credit, and the reason exposes deep cracks inside the Democratic Party. Maher notes that Schumer at least asserts himself on certain issues rather than surrendering to every surge of woke activism. A clear example is Schumer's forceful condemnation of rising anti-Semitism on the American left. As Senate Minority Leader, he delivered a major speech and issued public statements calling out chants like "from the river to the sea" and other rhetoric. He believed crossed the line from protest into dangerous prejudice, even when it came from progressive members of his own party. By taking this stand, Schumer set himself apart from activist currents that tend to dismiss such concerns, showing a willingness to push back when he believes the rhetoric has gone too far.
The party that supports so many issues that benefit the middle class still considered out of touch by 62% of Americans. In plain English, nobody likes a snob. Hillary Clinton didn't have anyone on rural research or outreach when she ran in 2016 until the race tightened just before the election. Then they hired one. And where was his office? Brooklyn. True story. Politics is local, not locally sourced. It's not artisan. It's art and stand.
Maher argues that beyond constantly yielding to activist messaging, Democratic leadership has become increasingly disconnected from everyday Americans. Instead of addressing voters' real concerns and offering practical solutions on issues like inflation, healthcare, and public safety. He says the party seems fixated on pleasing the loudest, most extreme progressive voices. That obsession comes at a high cost. It alienates moderates and those who feel ignored, leaving them frustrated and disillusioned. Maher points out that the party's focus on virtue signaling and chasing every new activist trend often produces grandstanding rather than effective governance. In his view, by putting ideology above real-world problem-solving, Democrats risk losing touch with the broader electorate. The outcome is not only weakened electoral prospects, but also a failure to serve the very people the party claims to represent.
James Carville knew how to win, and he blamed the Democratic losses this November 2nd on stupid wokeness, to which AOC fired back that wokeness is a term almost exclusively used by older people these days. So that should tell you all you need to know. What? This is a term folks like you brought out very recently and had been proudly displaying at every march since. Just last year, The Guardian declared woke the word of our era. I guess they didn't get the memo from the Mean Girls Club. We don't use that emoji anymore. Woke, please, we say fetch now.
It's notable that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is now trying to distance herself from the term woke. Yet it has been a recurring theme across nearly all her rallies and public appearances. While she may personally reject the label, many of her actions and statements have led critics and observers to see her as part of the woke movement, from pushing highly progressive policies to vocally backing activist-led causes. Her public persona often reflects the values tied to the woke left. Maher argues that AOC consistently leans into activist-driven politics, highlighting her repeated embrace of performative gestures, activist demands, and identity-focused messaging. In his view, attempting to reject the label while behaving in ways that reinforce it only highlights the gap between perception and intent. Whether she accepts the term or not, her political brand has become closely linked with progressive activism. Ultimately, AOC's continual alignment with activist energy and performative acts keeps her firmly in the woke spotlight. Despite her efforts to shake the label, Maher contends her actions speak louder than words, cementing her association with the woke movement and its agenda. That wraps up today's video on Star Ripple. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.